Thanks for coming, everyone. Emily Rosello Mercurio is a poet originally from Massachusetts. She graduated last year from Wheaton College with a BA in English and Women's and Gender Studies. While at Wheaton, she served as editor for Rushlight Literary and Art magazine, one of the oldest college literary magazines in the country. Her work is forthcoming in Virginia Commonwealth University's Plain China magazine. Let's give a hand for Emily.
Hello, everybody. I'll just dive right in and start with sort of an older poem from like 2 years ago, which is called Elm. Your leaves are like candles. Your leaves are on the earth, burning like candles. Your leaves have burned all the grass. I collapse like hot wax running on your wild roots. Brass shines like gold, shines like sparks. Can you imagine how it feels to start a fire? A spider the color of lichen crawls over my finger and back into the wood. A spider lives in my finger and in the wood. It moves in me and my horror. It moves in me and I itch. White lichen, white kitchen, white chocolate. Can you imagine how it feels to compromise? One bough is curved like lightning. One bough is dead. A dozen branches are green, and one at the top has turned red. A sick tree grows sick shoots. The branches are low to the earth. Your leaves have veins. Your leaves have teeth. Can you imagine how it feels to be alive? This next poem I wrote last summer, 2 summers ago, when I was living in Providence, Rhode Island, which can be a lovely experience, but maybe wasn't. So this is called Weeds. Nobody planted you here. You found your way by earth or by air to this gray roadside soil. Nobody looks at you. Some days the haze has no edge. Some days an overpass is a vortex of wind, a small life twisting closed in the clutching of vines. Today at the bus stop, a man put his hand on your thigh and asked if you were safe here. He said it's not every day he sees nice girls like you in this city. Every beautiful thing for miles must be hiding behind the hedges of the East End. Down here they are plucked or swallowed. You become the goldenrod, the heat which cracks the pavement. You become the broken glass in every sidewalk crack. A plastic bottle in the ginkgo tree shines like a raindrop, and the sunset comes through it. Wet laundry snaps in the wind, a firework of mist. Something is dying underneath your shoe. One more sort of old poem from college, which I guess we'll say is inspired by rather than derivative of Sylvia Plath. It's called Shroud. Something is slithering in the dawn, and I am weakened by colors. Pinks pop like grapes between 2 fingers. Greens creep down my spine. Do you see how I desaturate the day? How I always pale my bedroom in waking as this ceiling fan stirs my blank breath? A beat of daybreak. The white sun lingers. For weeks I have spoken in questions. With no compass to draw in this empty circle, I pull from you a single word I can slip into. Did you think it was funny, the way I swam in the wake of your life, like a dolphin leaping or snared? Did you hear the chattering of seagulls as they looked for your ship each night? An oven-headed woman burns beside me. Tongue-red tulips are vibrating in the garden. Every vase in my house is broken. An ocean is rolling its head in the sand as I float out my window to the moon, stone-eyed and translucent. I rise naked to the night, blue as a mussel shell and melting. Drops of my body fall dark upon the fields, and the sea crowds over them, howling. Find me, knotted in this foam, dead as a pearl. To get to some newer work. This is from maybe 2 weeks ago, and we had this assignment for workshop to be a little impenetrable. So this is a little impenetrable by design, and it's called dendrochronology, which is the science of studying tree rings. When you cut a tree down. A bug lays eggs in the wood or the genome, and you get a fat knot of veins and hair marbling the meat, the trunk a crop circle of termite teeth. It might take 30 years before you can cut it down and turn it. Little flowers everywhere exploding pink, a man licking syrup off the bark where the wolf spiders dig trapdoors above their homes, red ants on his tongue, a cardinal cracking seeds on his skull. A flock of starlings built their nests in your mouth. You planted an acorn in your stomach and forgot, didn't you, until it started to root. If there's an apple, then bite it. Skin shellacked with beetle wax, a glowing globe gum red. Seeds not poisonous until they hit the gut. You'd need 200 to really start to die. Your honey-crisp flesh, those paper petals white as apple maggots. A tall man with long fingers has begun to make a bowl. Burls fly apart on the lathe, all those hidden voids. Cups filled with white lines of ribbon worms chewing heart meat, acid and pulp. The trees widows plant on their husbands, branches too wet to burn. Already the gypsy moths have begun to lay their eggs. On a quiet night you can hear them chewing. So this next poem, actually these next two poems, deal with questions of family and of mental illness, of schizophrenia specifically, and the sort of specter that mental illness can cast over generations of a family. So this is called Flashpoint. An unwinding transmutation of flesh between the mirror and the moment of looking. A shadow has carved a vacancy in my mouth. My uncle's eyes stare back, drifting under glass. All the crazy dead of my family are speaking my name in silver. My face dissolves in the dark. Before the moment of departure, all things were warning signs. Did you ever try your footing on the edge of the black water from which there is no surfacing? Of the 50 test subjects, all reported visions, deformations, beasts, fantastic and monstrous beings, family both living and dead. Dim room, dark mirror, low light, no sound. 50 transubstantiated faces, 50 bodies melted. Who would I see if not God? If not you as you were in that first winter of graduate school when you walked outside to die. They closed all the roads in 1978, a state of emergency. Did you ever forget to be afraid of the weather? Snow so deep it could not be moved, dozens dead or trapped, and you talking to demons in the wind. We buried you the week I left for school, a stone ready for years, name engraved. In a dark mirror, my face becomes new, a stranger's subtle morph, my own eyes now knowing something that I don't. At your wake, we cried for ourselves. Your sisters held each other, hushing. I remind them of someone. Is it you or your Janus face, god of transitions? An object at rest will stay at rest unless acted upon by an unbalanced force. My image deforming in the cage of a mirror, a lock jiggling, a door I can't unclose. If I could speak to the dead, I would ask you, did you ever try to see how far you can go before you're gone? Metanoia, epigraph. And whoever was not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. Revelations 20:15. I stood with the dragon on the shore of the sea. Beasts ate out of our hands. Before this moment you were a candle, winter quietude. O prodromal you, clever flame we loved to kindle, your skull basin brimmed with gasoline. Who among us struck the book of matches? Acid rumor sizzles in your mouth, motions made once and again. There are broken clocks within us. Yours popped gears, mine ticks. The old order of things has passed away, this watershed of gnashing rivers, this fracture of becoming. Now a time where time collapses, life where life implodes. Cursed earth terror, eating himself out of the world. O lunatic mouth, pile of roses heaped beneath the earth as winter masses blue upon a cloud. All the petals have melted in snow. Red tongues, they seeped into your bones, wet your burning name. Sleeping son of omen gone to rot, a wilderness smoked from your eyes. Our augury foretold collapse, your thick fury of screaming geese. Who among us taught you the language of the dead? And my last poem is called Eurydice Dreams of Cicadas. Eurydice being, in the Greek mythology, wife of Orpheus, who was left in hell after he had to look back at her instead of saving her, basically. But this is Eurydice Dreams of Cicadas. For 17 years, the black earth closed in, swallowed my body like a stone. My glass wings folded inwards, white paper against my terrible carapace. My exoskeleton like a walnut shell, a cracked husk I can sometimes wriggle out of. For 17 years, a creature of beneath, a silent sound, hum of movement from an insect still living. I wait for a moment of summer when I might surge into the clearness of night, might fly and sing briefly like no time at all. Thank you. Now a little introduction. Hema Surendranathan is a joint MFA PhD candidate in the English department at Cornell. She was born and raised outside Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and received her undergraduate degree in English from Bryn Mawr College. She has previously worked at Guernica Magazine and Electric Literature in New York City, and at Ethos Books and Literary Center in Singapore. Her poetry has been published in Spillway Magazine. She is currently entertaining the idea of writing a novella. Please welcome Hema.
So this is a really new piece that I wrote last month and was editing up till this morning. So it's very fresh, but I'm going to read it. It's called Next Door. Anita cannot bear the cat next door. Early in the black morning, it yowls till Mrs. Stein rises and feeds it. The old woman shares the floor with Anita, and the cat plays in the tiny corridor between their apartments, while Mrs. Stein's door hangs open like a slacked jaw. Anita has to nudge the cat aside so it doesn't dash into the elevator and disappear. This morning, woken by its cry, Anita imagines allowing the cat to squeeze past her. The doors of the elevator shut, no fault of hers. The cat sits inside alone. Perhaps it takes in the cool sterility of the interior, the gray-veined marble, the stone-tiled walls. When it reaches the ground floors and the doors stretch open, it paces into the city, unnoticed by the doorman or the super or anyone at all. It sets off into the Upper West Side morning, searches for whatever it needs to fill in the color of its sad call. If Nikesh shared her irritation, things would be easier, but he adores the animal. He leaves a little saucer of cream outside their door, and when Mrs. Stein's children come to get her for the weekend, he always offers to watch the cat. Each time, Mrs. Stein refuses. Poseidon rides just fine in the car. There isn't a more bombastic name for a whiny, skinny cat, Anita thinks, her hand involuntarily brushing Nikesh's as she turns in bed. He's awake, too. She turns to him. Do you think Poseidon could even catch a fish? It's just a name. Maybe Mrs. Stein likes the myth. But Poseidon? Apparently, her son named him. And don't tell me you're one of those people who gets wound up by other people's cats' names. Anita rolls her eyes. Maybe I am, she thinks. Anita met Nikesh at a party at a mutual friend's home in Flatiron 4 years ago. She saw him with his moony spectacles, fumbling with the salad tongs, and it felt like she'd opened the door to a room she'd forgotten existed. They were the last to leave the party and wandered slowly up Broadway. On 72nd, there was a man playing the saxophone, and the buildings transformed from brownstone to Gothic, and she kissed him. It was all blue light and blue notes. Anita and Nikesh moved in together to the one-bedroom on 91st and Riverside a year later. From their bedroom window, she could see the children walking to the park. She was moved by the image and thought, how simple, the pleasure of going to the park. Nikesh watched Anita watching the world. He was wide open to her, and they lived like this for a while, suspended in the womb of their own making. Nikesh watching Anita, Anita watching the world. In those days, nothing ever woke them up. These days, things are different. After work, Anita avoids returning to the apartment. She walks into a bar and gives her order to the bartender as she sits down. Someone places a warm palm on her back, at the base of her neck. Anita knows it is Remmy as soon as she smells him. He wears the same cologne he always has. Her drink arrives and he sits down next to her. How's Nikesh? The same as the last 3 years. Anita met Remmy in a bar 7 years ago. They dated for a couple of years, and once it ended, they still orbited one another's circles, bumped into each other here and there. There wasn't the city without Remmy. Anita liked Remmy best when he reminds her of the first time they met, drunk and shots all around. Just like that night, she lets him buy her a second drink and a third. Anita takes a cab home from Remy's apartment. She looks out the window as the car crosses the tunnel in the park. The night is lit with the yellow of electric lights, and green moss interrupts the darkness of the stone. When the car slips out of the tunnel and back to the west side, it is like a mouth welcoming her to a strange new world. Columbus in the 70s is lit a terrible molar white. Snow falls into the cavity of the city. Long day, Nikesh is washing a blue plate, his glasses perched on the top of his head. She can barely speak and sits down at the dining table. She sees him close the tap, but the faucet drips slow and persistently. She wants to tell him to fix it. Instead, she is stuck in her spot, screwed into her chair, voice muted by its own fleshy muzzle. Are you all right? He presses a palm to her forehead. Do you want to talk? You seem upset. She looks at the faucet, and Nikesh follows her gaze. Really? The faucet? Fine, we don't have to talk. He turns back to the sink. You know, Mrs. Stein finally asked me to cat sit, but I have to be away for the day. I'll be home around midnight. Can you just sit in the apartment and feed it? I'll take over when I'm back. She nods and walks herself to the bedroom. She looks out the window towards the highway and tries to remind herself the water's not far off. But it's dark, and all she can hear is car on car on car. Nikesh leaves a note taped to the fridge with instructions about Mrs. Stein's apartment and Poseidon. Her phone vibrates, and she responds to the message. She takes a bottle of wine from the counter, 2 glasses from the cupboard above the sink, leaves her apartment and crosses the tiny corridor to Mrs. Stein's. Inside, Poseidon is curled on the sofa. Anita doesn't like how the cat blends into Mrs. Stein's clammy cream sofa. Sneaking around, his wry body limbs the furniture, suffusing it with a liveliness which annoys her. Outside, she can see snow falling thickly, casting a hollow glow all around. Then the cat starts to yowl. Anita tries to ignore it. The cat feels like an affront, some deep offense that shouldn't be. She drinks a glass of wine quickly, pours another, and wanders into the bedroom for respite. She opens drawers and sees Mrs. Stein's soft nightgowns, half-finished lotions and shower gels, receipts, notepads, a sewing kit. She scans the walls with their bookshelves and photos. Her eyes land on a photo album when she hears the doorman's ring. She takes the album and buzzes Remmy up. Anita sits down on the cream couch and opens the album. She sees Mrs. Stein, young with curls spinning out the top of her head, yellow bathing suit lit by the blue sky, and her wide mouth. Mrs. Stein's lips lift into her cheeks, and she laughs. The album is full of these beach photos. In them, the sea is lightened into a sun-choked blue. It's a party, she thinks. Men with cold-looking drinks, women in bright-colored clothes, a serious-looking black grill, and also the children. In most of the shots, they seem merely a suggestion, a sandcastle half-finished, the red pail in the background of the shot. Anita turns the page to the photo of a little boy watching the sea. He is alone, just sand, water, small body. The boy's chin is tucked towards his chest, but his eyes are cast into the water, teal and churning and vast. His mouth is shut tight, collapsed into a small line. It seems as though he has lost something, and somehow this negotiation with the sea may afford return. Although the scene is sad, Anita is soothed by the photo. She is caught like a fish on a hook, watching the boy watch the sea. Man, it's hot in here. Remmy steps inside and Anita looks up from the album. He opens a window and suddenly there it all is. The cat's cry, the beating highway, the static, and the city. Remmy pours himself some of the wine and sits with Anita on the couch. He swirls the red liquid in the glass and moves his arm behind her to her waist. He undoes his tie. She sees the colored silk unwind and fall into his lap. It was early spring when Remmy and Anita ended things those years ago. They were at the Museum of Modern Art for some unmemorable exhibition. She was so bored, shuffling between the sculptures and painting and collages, she finally left to buy a hot dog from the cart on 53rd Street. It was sunny despite the cold, and light shot off the edges of the cart sharply. Remmy found her eating the dog quickly, desperate to be released from boredom. He wiped mustard from her cheek and laughed. What a kid. Imagine if you had a kid, all the wiping you'd have to do. Good thing that's not happening. It was not an unexpected thing for him to say. Remmy never liked children, and he'd talked about it, but Anita never paid much attention. She was so young at 25. But this time, something inside her changed. She looked at the empty foil in her hand, the fusty streaks of mustard, the dross of crumbs. She crushed the foil, her fists clenching over it as it bent into itself. She tossed the foil into a trash can. In her, something else collapsed. A boat into the harbor, water into her gut. She ended things with Remmy a week later. Anita feels Remy's neck on her, a small heat against the cold, when she realizes she cannot hear Poseidon's cry. She pushes Remmy away and sees the open window. She rushes over to it, and as she does, Remmy spills the red wine onto the couch. The red mats and unfolds onto the white surface. She cannot see the despondent cat anywhere, and outside the streets are blanketed with snow. Can you please check outside? He has to be there. He isn't anywhere here. Anita's hand grips the windowsill as she scans the white streets. Remmy kisses her on the cheek and turns to leave. He hesitates at the door. Anita, what are we doing? Just find the cat. He tries to speak again, but then she looks at him. Her eyes are dark, moonless. Remmy knows this opacity in her and leaves. Anita doesn't care much about the cat's well-being. She is worried about what Nikesh will think and say. She returns to Mrs. Stein's bedroom to replace the photo album, but finds herself gazing at a series of family portraits. She distracts herself from her anxiety by studying the faces of the people in the pictures. She recognizes the boy watching the sea in the face of a man. He is lanky and assured in a suit. He's next to Mrs. Stein, one arm around her shoulders. She saw him in the elevator last year, just weeks before his accident. He had come to give his mother a cat. Now she cannot connect them all. The boy in the photo, the framed adult, the man riding the elevator to see his mother, the neighbor's dead son. She thinks about these versions of the same person and cannot understand how they make up the same one. The same month, she miscarried. She was in the ivory-colored tub, and there was just a little blood, and she called for Nikesh right away. The strange red ejection unfurled into the warmth. They went to the hospital. Nikesh dressed her in her flannel pajamas and her bathrobe. It was as though it all happened to someone else. She woke up the next day with the sound of Poseidon's call. Nikesh was next to her, and when she opened her eyes, he was the first thing she saw. This was how it would be. This was how she'd live now. She places the album back in its slot when she hears the elevator ring. Must be Remmy, she thinks. She walks outside to the corridor, and there, Poseidon, lapping cream from the saucer, and Nikesh stooping over the little cat, strokes its head. Look at this little guy in the hallway. How'd he get out? Auntie Anita can be a bit silly, can't she? He looks at her. I'll take over. You go to bed. He picks up the cat and walks into Mrs. Stein's apartment. The door closes tightly. Anita is alone in the corridor. She hears the buzzer in Mrs. Stein's go off, and she hears Nikesh ask who's there. She cannot hear what comes out of the speaker, but she knows Remmy won't be coming back up. She imagines the two men crossing paths on their ways in and out. In her apartment alone, she undresses. She catches her reflection in the window and sees the sharpness of her collarbones. When she looks into the bathroom mirror as she brushes her teeth, it is like her face is morphing into itself again and again. She sits in the tub, lowering herself into the water gingerly, like a mouth tasting new food. She thinks of the boy by the beach, his little body so close to the ocean. She wonders what he was looking for. She shudders even though the water is warm. Tomorrow she'll just not get off at Columbus Circle. She'll ride the train right to the bottom of the island, right to South Ferry. It's easy to forget the city is an island, that it could be washed away by dirty water. She thinks she'll get off the train, take that short walk down, and look right into the eye of the East River. She does not know what she will do then. It does not matter. The water is not going anywhere. Thank you.